Hey everyone, welcome to another segment of Oh, and Another Thing. Oats is the bonus content that we put out for everyone to listen to, where we talk about an eclectic mix of this, that's, and the others that comes up in our head. Either it's pre-podcast or post-podcast. It's basically the stuff that pops in your head while you're sitting on the toilet. Feel free to listen to any of these as bonus content. It might be some stuff that we did talk about in a previous podcast, but we wanted to give it its own little slice of time to get a little bit more in depth with it. Well, here we go. Sit back and relax as usual and enjoy. Oh, and another thing. You know what it is. It's another oh and another thing. So, first off, at the end of this, there will be no solution to what's up for discussion right now. It's just that it's up for discussion. We'd love to know what people are thinking in regards to this topic, and it just came to mind because it was something that the dinosaur and I were talking about, and it just was like it hit and stuck for a good bit. And it's something that people talk about and we take for granted and we discuss it like it is ours and we have ownership and we all know what it means. But then we do things that sort of contradict that whole thing. So, what I'm talking about is freedom of speech. And I sigh like that because it's a weighty subject. I think that people have a vague concept of what it's all about. But once it's put into action, then people are like, oh, what we meant is freedom of speech in this way, not entirely the broad spectrum of what freedom means. And definitely the broader spectrum of what speech means. And we want to encourage people to talk, say, and express how they feel and express the way they want. And then a lot of times people want it to be within the parameters that makes sense for them or the way that they're wanting to be represented. Case in point, we have a thing where we're wanting to give platform for people to say what they want. But then even we're guilty of it. We want our brand to be preserved, to be our thing. Where like the dinosaur and the dude, even though we're fledgling at best as far as a podcast and a content provider, we're trying to cultivate our brand. And by doing that, we don't want to be seen as one way or the other. We want to be seen the way we want our brand to be received the way that we're wanting it to, be out there as. We're not wanting it to be associated with this person or that person, this point of view or the other, just as the dinosaur and the dude is wanting to be. And so the dinosaur and I try to cultivate that, understanding that the topics that we talk about, the sources that we stayed, and the interviews that we have with people can be skewed by those that are listening to that. So then it gets you into a quandary of like, okay, we want to have all these things, but we don't want to this shape the brand that we are cultivating now. It gets more convoluted when you take into consideration the freedom of speech. And maybe let's just pause real quick and talk about that. And freedom of speech is a principle that supports the freedom of an individual or a community to articulate their opinions and ideas without fear of retaliation, censorship, or legal sanction. The right to freedom of expression has been recognized as a human right in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and international human rights law by the United Nations. And so many countries have constitutional laws that protect freedom of speech. To terms like free speech, freedom of expression are interchangeably in political discourse. And this I'm reading directly from Wikipedia. And it's like, however, in legal sense, the freedom of expression includes any activity seeking, receiving, and imparting information or ideas regardless of the medium used. But that's where things still get tricky because, as I was saying before, the dinosaur and I are trying to, cultivate our brand and make sure that we stay in the middle as much as possible, which is odd to say out loud, but we don't want to be viewed as one way politically, religiously, whatever. And those are the minefields as a content creator, provider, whatever, podcast duo, we often have to straddle. If we're wanting to get into more topics and not get pigeonholed for strange oddities, UFOs, da 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 da, because then you get pigeonholed and that's the only content that you're going to have. And then if somebody's into that, they'll listen. But if they really want to talk about, listen to a discussion on deeper subjects, then they'll go elsewhere. So we're wanting to be able, to have the entire cake and eat it too. A lot of people do. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if you're wanting to be as much of a provider of topics as we are. Totally makes sense. Um, I think though you get into that quandary where you are start talking about brand, then it becomes a thing of where does freedom of speech lie within that? Because we can take that same concept of that brand and then now we're a brand in a brand, or we're a brand using another brand and or associated with it. So say for instance, we have something that we want to release. We have something that we want to release, but we want to make sure that it stays within the concepts of our brand. So we're not putting out anything that is going to be belligerently salacious with no fact checking and no referencing of sources or no basic journalistic approach at all. And then you want to put that on YouTube. Well, YouTube is a brand, and YouTube has its own content restrictions and its own content restrictions and requirements, as a matter of fact. And if we don't meet with that, then you are likely to get a strike, or you're likely to get age restricted, or just eventually taken off entirely. Now, the argument could be, well, where's the freedom of speech in that? And again, not going to have the answers for you at this. This is just talking about, discussing the topic um, aloud and open for people to put in comments or different things that they have in mind in regards to it. But once you start layering that, where you're having a discussion, you're wanting that discussion to be as free and unrestricted as possible, but then you're wanting it to be also to where it's kind of, it's not swaying your brand in any kind of way from the direction it wants to go. Then you release that within the brand structure that you have. Well, now you've got to fit that within the brand structure of another one. And as far as podcasts go, you got to fit that within the structure of whoever you're publishing whoever you're using to publish your podcast, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon, whatever. And if it doesn't hit, I mean, like you have to then massage that content so that it fits each and every outlet's requirements and doesn't go against their restrictions. Because then if you do, then you are likely to get, like I said, a strike or blacklisted, or from either one of those, one or all. So then you're like, okay, Do I then find a resource where we'll accept that? Well, then you got like one or two. Okay. And then after that, if that doesn't work, then you pretty much have to put it on yours, your own, like for us, we'd have to put it on our own website. And then your website provider might be like, we got restrictions and things too. So there goes the battle with freedom of speech, is where you're able to say all these things and you're able to express yourself in all these ways. But if you're trying to use vehicles to get that out there, you have to play within the sandbox that is provided to you by way of those entities. And if you can't do that, then you got to find your own means of getting that out there. And if that doesn't work, I mean, I guess we're back to pigeons. Uh, that sounds facetious, but at the same time, it's an interesting thing to think about, and that's where the dinosaur and I were having that conversation. It's like, okay, what can we? How do we celebrate freedom of speech responsibly? I think that's the question. How do we celebrate freedom of speech responsibly? If you're just out being belligerent and saying whatever comes to mind because you just know that, hey, you can, and thus it's kind of like an abuse of freedom of speech, then yeah, people want to clamp down on that. But then at the same time, no, fuck it. It's freedom of speech. You can say whatever the fuck you want. At the same time, I personally would rather that freedom of speech be done in a intelligent way, in a way that is going to inspire conversation, and there be general conversation and not spewing of hate or spewing of ideas that are just totally there to incite violence, hatred, and discord. I think, I mean, not discord, but well, overall shitty behavior. I it's a very very fine line to balance on, and it's interesting that the dinosaur and the dude are at a point where we're actually trying to figure out if we want to balance ourselves on that. It's a good place to be. It gets us thinking. It gets us really wondering in regards to how we want to put ourselves out there. Do we really want to branch into content that is going to be possibly have the means of elevating um, us and what we provide to people? Sure, that's great. I think that again is the freedom of speech that we have to, that we have to we have to do it responsibly, and that's going to be a thing that we will be addressing and figuring out more and more as we go along. But it was just one of those things that came up of like, this would be a great discussion thing that we can have as an oat segment, because that's what these segments are all about. And it's great to know that we have the ability to put something out like this to hopefully engage those conversations with one another, uh, to be more in the discussion of what it is, as opposed to people just ranting out my freedom of speech and not really having that discussion, not even really knowing what it's all about. So hopefully this little rambling helped spark some interest, spark some conversations with people, in what is freedom of speech to you, and what does that mean? Do you feel that it needs to be as responsible? There's a responsibility to the freedom of speech. everyone has it. It's not really something that we're giving to somebody. Everyone has the ability to speak and should be, I mean, to speak and should be encouraged to, and the ability to do it, regardless if you agree with it or not, or somewhat, or in certain aspects or not. But if there's conversation to be had and a means of learning from another person to be gained, we should have that dialogue, and we should have the freedom to be able to have those dialogues and have the ability to speak. Um, but what do we do with that when we're also having restrictions and um, guidelines that have to be met in order to have that freedom? I think the freedom is I think the freedom is being restricted and or taken away by saying, okay, you can't say this word anymore. You have to say unalive. You can't say this any word anymore. You have to say the hard R word, the R word. And now I can say this, but then at the same time, I do have my own reservations with a lot of words as well. And those words I have very seldom, if ever, used. Um, I don't see the point of it, and that's my. But again, that's my choice, not something that I should be able to just say this person can't say anymore, because that's a power I don't have over people, or uh, not that I don't have. I don't want to have that power to where I am keeping people from expressing themselves. Because there's a lot of ways that people are expressing themselves that's the only way they can articulate it, because that's the only vocabulary they have to do it. Like we've talked about before in other episodes, you have your vocabulary and that's what you speak with. It's not necessarily saying that I'm smarter than you because my vocabulary is different than yours, but the expression and the communication, what you're getting across, you're doing it the best that you can. And I'm not saying that I have a high vocabulary either. I know there's other people that are way more capable and way more fluent and even in multiple languages than I am. And I'm not really trying to outdo them. Um, they have achieved that because that's something that they were experienced. I mean, you know, they were they were experiencing or they've been involved in. That's their thing. I get it. The point is, though, limiting someone's ability to articulate what it is that they're feeling, thinking, and how they're wanting to say it. Um, that's where we come to another really sticky part of communication. Getting to a point where someone is not wanting to expand upon their means of communication. That's another one. It's like if you know of a means to articulate yourself more so than you are right now in ways that can reach more people, or ways that more people can understand you than they do right now, then why not do that? But if some people don't want to do that, then it's kind of like, mm, are you are you holding yourselves back because you don't want to expand your tools? You just want to use this one tool is the only one you want to use all the time and every time, because you're like, fuck it, I'm not of the mindset or the desire to expand upon my vocabulary or my tools that I can use to communicate with people. Again, though, that's your choice, because like freedom of speech kind of goes in hand in hand with freedom of choice, I think. And because you're choosing there's a choice that is being made to speak and articulate and express yourself in ways that you are doing it. I think we have to recognize those things about people, accept them, because that's how people communicate. And that's how this person you're talking to, or this person that's talking to you, is choosing to express themselves. I think sometimes we have to take the personal out of what it is that somebody's saying to us and just listen to what it is they're trying to say. I'm not saying that everything that somebody says isn't going to be personal, and some people say things personally to you in order to rile you up or get a reaction or response out of you. That's not communication. That's just pushing buttons and looking to incite something. Proving a point by way of getting someone to respond or react in a way that kind of goes with the stereotype they're trying to push. The freedom of speech is a thing that is very mercurial, and it's defined by those. Each and every person that embraces it has a different definition of what it is. And each and every person that embraces it also has a different limitation or restriction or means of defining how other people can use it, which is also interesting. But that was that. It was just a means of like, oh, hey, let's shoot this out there as a discussion. Hopefully people get some discussion from it, and feel free to shoot comments. Feel free to let us know what you think in regards to it, and we'll have the means for you to respond and be able to do that because it's freedom of speech. Again, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for checking us out, and we really are amazed at our audience as it continues to grow. So we appreciate that, and you and everyone else that is into The Dinosaur and the Dude. Feel free to check us out at TheDinosaur&TheDude.com, where you can find all the merch, all the episodes, and all the other social media shenanigans that we have going on. We're looking to expand it pretty soon, working on some new content and how to present it. But just be on the lookout for that. Again, thank you all. Looking forward to it, and thanks again for listening to another episode of and Another Thing.